Day 6, Diddy trial. I'm gonna make this super fast because we have a short lunch break. But Diddy came in this morning, really seemed to be in good spirits, hugged his lawyer, Alexandra Shapiro, and Mark Agnifilo. And they had some discussions about witnesses getting certain testimonies struck. And at one point, Mark Agnifilo said something along the lines of that, this case is becoming based on gossip. He brought up the fact that there is a chef, Diddy's chef, is expected to testify, who was allegedly assaulted. And Agnifilo says, well, where is this in the indictment? This has nothing to do with racketeering, etc. And the government came back and said, look, the chef is a victim of forced labor. And there was a lot of discussion around this, but I want to give you one little piece of that before we go to Dawn Richard finishing her direct examination. Now, I'm going to make this kind of general, but Dawn Richard, she testified about the Cassie Skillet incident with Diddy. And she said that after she witnessed this, that both Diddy and Harve Pierre, they kind of threatened her at 2 different times. And one of the last things Diddy had said to her, according to Dawn Richard, was, if you tell, people go missing. And during the cross-examination, which was done by Diddy's female attorney, Nicole Westmoreland, and I thought she was effective, but she was a little nervous seeming at first. That's just my opinion. She forgot to say objection, but I mean, again, that's just why I kind of thought she was nervous. But she pointed out that about 7 of Dawn Richard's prior conversations with the government, she left that part out, the whole people go missing part. And Dawn Richard would get this transcript, she would look at it and be like, I mean, I don't know, like there was a note taker there, but I don't know why that I didn't say it. She admitted that her memory has changed throughout the years. And then the government, got her to elicit during their redirect that, well, your memory has changed because you've tried to suppress these bad memories for so long. And then we kind of helped you elicit these memories by talking about your trauma and doing all these interviews. So yeah, defense went on to say, well, okay, so let's say you met with them 8 times. You really only remembered this alleged death threat the 8th time. They showed her a transcript, I believe, from April or May of 2025, where she did say, people go missing. They also called her out, the defense called her out on another, statement from her civil lawsuit, where she had described Diddy pulling Cassie out of a car by the hair and dragging her onto the grass, and a lot of people saw. And Dawn Richard said, oh no, that was something that my lawyers, they messed up on. It was a miscommunication, excuse me. And then the government got, during their redirect, to say, well, you were actually thinking of another violent incident, so it wasn't completely made up. Let's see what else.
The words in her mouth, maybe.
So Dawn Richard talked about how, she worked with Diddy from 2004 to 2009 with Danny Kane, and then 2009 to 2011 on the Dirty Money Group. And she left in 2011, and she described, Diddy would call her on FaceTime sometimes to check in, and Dawn said, the best thing to do to kind of, keep him at arm's length or keep him happy was just be nice and polite and cordial. Well, the defense kind of got up there and said, well, didn't you call him and try to work with him after that? And she, at that point was forced to say yes. And so she did, reach out and initiate communication several times first. And then the government, when they did their redirect, they got it out of her that she only reached out to him because of Kalena Harper, essentially, and Kalena wanted her to. And then it got a little spicy with Nicole Westmoreland and Dawn Richard at one point. Sorry, my papers. Because she said something like, you were very successful when you were with Sean Combs, Danny Kane, Dirty Money, and talking about how she sold all these albums. And she alluded to the fact, and she actually said the words, no offense, but you haven't sold nearly as many albums since then. And I'm paraphrasing. And then at one point, Westmoreland kind of said, you were successful. And Dawn Richard is like, I am successful. So it was kind of like this little moment, I guess. I was like, oof. And then, they talked about how she filed a civil suit after Cassie. And I was a little surprised that Dawn Richard didn't really seem to know much about her civil suit, what her attorneys wrote in it. She really seemed to not, don't want to say she was elusive, because she really seemed to genuinely not know. I want to make sure I didn't. Oh my gosh, I'm almost forgetting. A crazy celebrity name was dropped today. Oh my gosh, I can't believe. There's so many notes, I almost forgot. Usher.
Oh.
Don Richard said that Usher witnessed Diddy punch Cassie in the stomach at a dinner in LA. And there was another, Jimmy Ovine was mentioned. And I think there was a Neil something. I didn't quite get this, so maybe look out for that name. But Neil. Don Richard said that they were at this dinner in LA, and this is who was in attendance, and Diddy punched Cassie in the stomach, and then she left, and she was like embarrassed, and then he kind of like choked her or something on the way home. But yeah, she said Usher was there. So I'm assuming Usher saw this. We don't know if Usher saw it with his own eyes, but he was at this dinner. And
so is he going to be called to the stand? We will find out.
And the government also made a point after all of these questions. The government would say something, or about the violence or whatever. The government would say, well, who of Diddy's employees were there? They would always want to know which employees were there, if any, and there always was a bodyguard, assistant, whatever, present. She also testified about this drug dealer named One Stop, who would sell Plan B and birth control and come to the studio, and she also corroborated Diddy's LV med bag that he kept his drugs in. And she testified that Diddy wore a gun in his back pocket, and that scared her. Then the defense came up and said, how many times did you see this gun? Basically insinuating that, you worked with him for over a decade. You only really saw this gun 2 or 3 occasions that she testified. And then they said, did you see him take it out? Did you see him wave it around? Did he threaten you with it? And she said no.
So you more threatened just because somebody has a gun on them. That don't mean that he's a threat. I'm glad they said that.
Defense ended their cross, or their recross, I should say, just by asking Dawn what she wanted out of the civil suit. And Dawn, she would say, she wants justice. She wants to be compensated for the work she did with Diddy. And they'd be like, okay, so you want money? And then she was like, yes. I think she was like, done, I'm done. And then we saw the start of Carrie Morgan's testimony. Carrie Morgan is Cassie's friend, her former best friend, a model. They were friends from 2001 to 2018. And this is the friend that Diddy allegedly hit over the head with a wooden hammer. Wow. Oh my gosh, I have to hurry up. And okay, so I'm going to make this general for now, because I'm going to make
a wooden hammer. God, that had to hurt, and she had to go to the hospital.
Another video later, but Carrie Morgan testified that there was an incident where, there's a couple. There was an incident in Jamaica where Diddy got mad at Cassie for taking too long in the bathroom, and when she came out, they went to the hallway. They rented this house in Jamaica, and Cassie let out some guttural screams. She described them as guttural and terrifying. And they ran away and hid in a ditch for what quote, felt like hours. I'm trying to think. I think I wrote that down with Cassie. They hid behind a tractor. I'll have to double check that. But also, just really quick, last thing before I run for now, and I'm sure I forgot things, but I'll go back later. But last thing, Carrie Morgan was at Cassie's house during the 2016, after the beatdown at the Intercontinental. She describes Cassie coming home with the hood, a black eye, puts her bags down, basically, and said that Cassie was kind of despondent. And then she described Diddy as showing up 30 minutes later, banging on the door with a hammer. Now, somehow throughout all this, Carrie Morgan doesn't know how, but the police were called. The police show up, they ask for Carrie Morgan's ID, she gives it to them. They ask for Cassie's, Cassie doesn't give it to them, and they end up leaving a card. The detective leaves a card and they leave. And Carrie, we were shown a Celebrate communication between Carrie Morgan and Christina Coram, Diddy's chief of staff, talking about this. And I have to go back through it and look, because she sent him a picture of the card, and she was kind of saying, look, I'm not used to all this. This is really intense. But yeah, and you can tell, by the way, Carrie Morgan, she's very cooperative, but it's just clear. She's like, I have moved on with my life. I do not want to be here. So the next witness was David James, a former personal assistant of Diddy's, and he looked so nervous, I felt like, when he was walking up to the stand, and Diddy kind of looked him up and down, not in an intimidating way, but really kind of stared at him, in my opinion. And he He cried on the stand, by the way. He definitely was like, yeah, had some tears. And he cried specifically when he was talking about his interview to become a personal assistant. He said that the head of HR, Vashta, pointed to a picture of Diddy on the wall and said, I'm finding the quote, and said, this is Mr. Combs's, oh, sorry. He said, this is Mr. Combs. This is Mr. Combs's kingdom. We're here to serve him. And that's when he teared up and they offered him like a tissue and stuff. So he worked for Diddy between May of 2007 and May of 2009. He talked about Diddy's, like his schedule and what he had to do for Diddy on a daily basis. And he said that he worked from 8 a.m. sometimes to 4 a.m. and he was paid $70,000 and testified he did get overtime, but we don't know how much. And he said that part of his schedule was to arrive at Diddy's house before he wakes for a, quote, successful day. Then he would file some business docs or put them out in front of him to kind of approve or sign. He would put a calendar out for him. He would put all his press bookings out. He would turn on the TV to his preferred channel. He would work with a chef for breakfast, and then he would knock on the door to see if Diddy was ready to wake up. You know, then if he was, he would get him all settled. Then when it was time to go, he would get security and then accompany him to all his meetings during the day, dinner, studio time. And dinner could be with anybody, business or pleasure. And then after studio time, it was a new destination. And then he said that they would figure out a call time for the next day that he would text out to the rest of the staff, depending on whatever was going on that night. So it was a lot. He testified that some security carried a switchblade. He testified about a bunch of Diddy's girlfriends. He named Kim Porter, Sarah, Tara, Yana, and Cassie. He talked about meeting Cassie on a yacht. He talked about how Cassie was like, wow, this is a crazy lifestyle. Like, I can't get over it. And how he told Cassie to get out, but she said she couldn't because Diddy paid for everything and controlled everything. Sorry, I'm hurrying. It's been almost 10 minutes. Witnesses we're about to see this week, Cassie's mom, the Chef Atkinson, and Charvet Hay. I wrote it down and now I can't find it. And the defense was trying to counter the fact that during direct, she said that Diddy controlled Cassie's career and made all these decisions in her life. And the defense was like, well, didn't he set her up with other artists that, were, more popular than her? And he named Lil Wayne. He named a few other, maybe one or two other people. Oh, Kid Cudi, obviously. And Carrie Morgan's like, I don't remember. And then they said, well, who do you remember? And she said French Montana, Too Short, Fabulous. And she said it was this mixtape, Rockabye Baby. And when she said that, Diddy kind of shook his head. Yes. And then something important or I don't know if it's important, but it was a crazy slip up because they were talking about Gina and how Gina was this source of contention for Cassie and for Diddy, and they brought up jealousy. That's, a big thing that the defense is hammering away at. And Carrie Morgan said that Gina was a big problem because, quote, she wouldn't go away. And she said also that Diddy had a full-on relationship with this little girl. And the defense had to be like, okay, little girl, you mean adult, right? And Carrie Morgan's like, yeah, adult, but she was much younger than us. And then she kind of goes off. I don't remember how it started. She said Cassie was hurt, and then she slipped up and was like, Gina got pregnant. And then she was like, oh, sorry. And Edniffle was like, whatever. So that was kind of a moment. Crazy. And I think that's pretty much what I missed. I kind of wanted to add something about the assistant, David James. He talked about when he was interviewing that he was asked why he wanted to be a personal assistant, and he gave an answer that, was how, I don't know, he gave an answer that was like a good interview answer. And then he said that he added something like, I can't stop, won't stop. And he said, Mr. Combs shook his head. And I noticed that when he said that, Diddy kind of shook his head. This is not important to the case. These are just details from the courtroom that maybe you care about, maybe you don't.
So again, we all have to agree he is a monster. He's a freak. He's a control freak. But so far, the reason he's in court, what he's getting charged for, nothing there right now. So we're going to continue and see what happens. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and I'll be back again. All right, let's get it.